Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. No one talks about what it costs to be the strong one. But if you've been carrying everyone else, this video is about you. Everyone notices you. They see the way you carry yourself, the way you show up for everyone else, the way you never seem to break under pressure. They admire your strength. They tell you how dependable you are, how resilient, how unshakable. And for a while, it feels good. You feel seen in a way that feels safe because it's tied to what you do, not who you are. But here's the truth most people never talk about. Being the strong one comes with a quiet, invisible cost. When you're always the one others lean on, you begin to forget what it feels like to lean on someone yourself. You learn to swallow your exhaustion, your doubts, your sadness, because showing them feels like failing the role you've created. And slowly, without even realizing it, strength becomes your identity. It's no longer just something you do to survive. It becomes the mask everyone expects you to wear. People praise your resilience, but they rarely see the weight it carries. They see the surface calm, the ability to hold it together, but they don't notice the tension in your shoulders, the quiet moments you spend asking yourself if you'll ever get a break, the private nights where you cry because no one else is watching. There's a fear that if you let anyone see your cracks, if you let yourself stumble even once, you'll no longer be reliable. You'll no longer be the one people count on. And so you keep going, even when it hurts, even when you feel drained, even when your heart whispers that you need help, but your pride whispers louder. And the irony is painful. The very strength that earns admiration is also the thing that isolates you, that makes you feel invisible in your own life. You start to notice that you're admired more for your endurance than your humanity. People love what you do, but they rarely love the quiet, messy, vulnerable parts of you that make you real. And that silence, that hiding of your inner truth becomes exhausting. You realize that being strong isn't just about power or courage. It's about carrying a weight no one else sees, often without asking for a single thing in return. And here's the first step toward change: noticing it, naming it. Acknowledging that the role of the strong one is not just a compliment, it's also a burden. You can let yourself feel the heaviness without judgment. You can give yourself permission to rest. You can begin to question the expectation that you must always hold everything together. Because the first sign of courage is seeing your own humanity clearly, even when everyone else only sees your strength. You've learned to armor yourself. At first, it made sense. Life taught you that showing weakness could be dangerous, that emotions could be weaponized, that asking for help might make you less valuable. So you built walls. Sometimes they were soft walls, subtle shields that kept people at a distance. Other times they were thick and impenetrable, designed to hold everything out: disappointment, grief, exhaustion, fear. And for a long time, those walls served you well. They kept you functional. They allowed you to meet expectations. They made you reliable, admired, even indispensable. You could show up for everyone else without hesitation, without pause, because you had mastered the art of keeping the chaos inside locked away. But walls, no matter how well constructed, always come with a cost. The longer you wear armor, the more it reshapes you from the inside out. You begin to forget what it feels like to be unguarded. You begin to forget that it's safe to ask for comfort, safe to admit exhaustion, safe to let someone see your tears. You start to confuse protection with survival and survival with identity. You start to believe that vulnerability is dangerous, that it is a risk too great to take. And so instead of living fully, you learn to exist behind a shield. And the thing about armor is that it doesn't just keep the world out. It keeps you out too. It isolates you in ways you barely notice until the silence becomes deafening. You start to feel disconnected from yourself, as if the person inside is no longer the person you show to the world. Your thoughts and emotions become like a locked room, one that only you can enter, and even then, only in glimpses. You long for connection, for someone to see you without judgment, but fear keeps you from opening the door. You tell yourself you are strong, capable, resilient, and you are. But you also begin to feel alone, unmoored, invisible in your own life. There are moments when the weight of it all becomes almost unbearable. You see other people leaning on each other, sharing their fears and struggles, laughing at their own imperfections, and you realize you have no memory of doing that for yourself. You've been the one everyone leans on, the one who never collapses, the one who never asks for help. And for a brief, painful moment, you feel the enormity of what you've been carrying alone. That fear, that quiet dread starts to rise. What if I'm not enough? What if no one really knows me? What if I'm always destined to be the one who holds it together while the people I care about remain unaware of the cost? It is a lonely realization. And yet it is also the beginning of something else, a crack in the armor where light can finally enter. That crack starts with noticing the patterns you've built, the habits that keep you hidden, the ways you've silenced your own needs in order to meet the needs of others. It begins with acknowledging that fear has dictated your choices for a long time. Fear of judgment, fear of being abandoned, fear of being deemed weak. You see now that armor is not just about protection. It is also about avoidance of pain, avoidance of rejection, avoidance of being truly known. And as you notice this, you begin to feel something unexpected, a mixture of relief and terror. Relief, because finally, you are not ignoring the truth. You are allowing yourself to see what has been happening beneath the surface. Terror, because vulnerability feels risky. Letting your guard down feels like stepping into a storm with no shelter. It feels unnatural, almost dangerous, because it has been so long since you practiced the simple act of being seen without performance. You realize that showing up authentically might feel uncomfortable, even painful, but it is necessary. It is the only way to stop carrying the invisible weight alone. The first step is small. It might be sharing a fleeting thought with someone you trust. It might be admitting a fear you've been hiding. It might be saying out loud that you are tired or overwhelmed or uncertain. The action is simple, but its impact is profound. With each act of honesty, the armor begins to loosen. You discover that the world does not crumble when you are not unshakable. You discover that asking for support does not make you weak. You discover that the relief of being seen is unlike any praise you've ever received for your strength, and yet the process is not linear. Some days the old habits creep back. You catch yourself hiding, smiling through exhaustion, refusing to share what's on your mind. You feel guilty for feeling tired, guilty for needing comfort, guilty for craving rest. You question whether you are betraying the identity of the strong one that people have come to rely on. But here's the quiet truth. Every time you choose to let someone in, every time you practice vulnerability, you are reclaiming your humanity. You are redefining what strength really means. Strength is not the absence of struggle. Strength is showing up for yourself even when it feels risky. Strength is embracing discomfort to find connection. Strength is choosing authenticity over armor. As you move through this, you start to notice patterns in your body and mind that you had ignored for years. Tension in your shoulders, shallow breathing, racing thoughts at night, a sense of disconnection that you couldn't explain. Each of these becomes a signal, a reminder that armor, while protective, is also constraining. You begin to practice listening to your body, to your emotions, to your quiet longings. You start to journal, meditate, or simply pause to notice what is happening inside. You begin to reclaim the spaces within yourself that had been barricaded for far too long, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to feel lighter, freer, more whole. The transformation is not dramatic or instant. It is quiet, subtle, and cumulative. Each act of vulnerability chips away at the walls. Each admission of need softens the edges of the armor. Each moment where you allow yourself to be seen, even a little, teaches you that the world will not shatter. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to trust others. You begin to realize that the very walls you built to protect yourself have kept you from experiencing life fully, from forming deep connections, from feeling truly known and understood. And the most beautiful part of this journey is the discovery that vulnerability is not weakness. It is a form of strength that the world rarely recognizes. It is the courage to be fully human. It is the willingness to show up exactly as you are without pretense or performance. It is the quiet rebellion against the idea that you must always be unbreakable to be worthy. You start to see that true strength is not in what you carry silently, but in what you are willing to share, in what you are willing to admit, in what you are willing to feel. The takeaway is simple, though not always easy. Notice where you hide. Notice where you armor. Notice where fear dictates your choices. Then take one small step toward letting someone in. Practice saying, I need help, or I feel tired, or I'm not okay today. Observe what happens. Notice the relief, notice the connection, notice the freedom. Each act of vulnerability is a gentle dismantling of the armor, a reclamation of your right to exist as a whole, imperfect human being. And in those moments when you allow yourself to be seen, when you speak your truth, even in the smallest way, you discover something radical. You are enough, not because you are strong, not because you endure, not because you perform, but because you are willing to be real, because you are willing to feel, because you are willing to be known. There comes a moment when the walls you've built, the armor you've carried, and the roles you've performed all begin to feel heavy beyond measure. You realize that living only behind shields has protected you, yes, but it has also kept you from fully experiencing the richness of life, from forming the connections you long for, and from understanding your own depth. You begin to notice that courage isn't about holding everything together or never faltering. It's about the willingness to step into the unknown, to let yourself be seen, and to face the discomfort of being imperfect and human. It starts subtly. A thought lingers in the back of your mind. What if I stopped pretending? What if I allowed myself to be messy, to show my fears, to speak my truths, even when they feel inconvenient or frightening? For years, you've been careful to present only the strongest, most composed version of yourself. And now the idea of stepping out from behind that image feels like walking across a tightrope over a chasm you can't see the bottom of. Fear pulses through you, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear that everything you've built will crumble. And yet, deep down, you feel a quiet, insistent call. The life I've been living behind my armor is not the only life possible. Courage doesn't arrive in fanfare. It doesn't come with a trumpet or a cheering crowd. It comes in whispers. In the moments when you decide to speak your truth, even though your heart is pounding. It comes in small, trembling steps toward authenticity, when you share a thought that has been hidden for years, when you admit a fear you've been carrying silently, when you allow yourself to cry in front of someone and not immediately apologize for it. These are not dramatic heroics. They are quiet acts of defiance against the narrative that you must always be unshakable to be worthy. And when you take that first step, you notice something remarkable. The world doesn't end. The people around you don't recoil in horror. They don't suddenly think less of you. In fact, many will respond with a tenderness that surprises you because they have been waiting, perhaps unknowingly, for permission to show up authentically themselves. Vulnerability is contagious. When you allow yourself to be seen, you create a space for others to be seen too. That realization is transformative. You begin to understand that courage is not a solitary act, it is relational. It is about showing up fully, not just for yourself, but for the people who are willing to meet you in your truth. The inner struggle that accompanies this awakening is fierce. For every moment of bravery, there is an echo of fear. What if I'm too much? What if I say the wrong thing? What if my vulnerability is met with indifference or dismissal? These thoughts can feel paralyzing, yet they are part of the process. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of fear. It is a deliberate choice to show up even when the outcome is uncertain, even when the past has taught you that exposing yourself can be risky. The decision to embrace vulnerability in this way is the most radical and courageous thing you can do. You begin to experiment with it in small ways. You let someone see the fatigue behind your smile, the anxiety behind your calm, the cracks in the image you've carefully maintained. You speak honestly about your struggles, your doubts, your imperfections without the need to justify or explain them. And as you do, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter. The tension that has lived in your chest for years begins to loosen. The fear of being unworthy, of being a burden, begins to soften. You start to realize that courage has a very practical effect. It frees you from the weight of your own armor, piece by piece. There is also a profound emotional shift that occurs. You begin to experience connection in ways you haven't before. You notice that the people who respond with empathy and understanding are often those you would least expect. You start to see that the act of being seen is not dependent on perfection, accomplishment, or control. It is dependent on presence, honesty, and authenticity. This realization changes the way you approach every interaction. Conversations become deeper, laughter becomes richer, and even silence becomes meaningful. You learn that strength is not only in the endurance of hardships, but also in the courage to reveal your humanity in the midst of them. Courage is also about reclaiming your own voice, For years, your needs, your wants, and your feelings may have been suppressed in favor of keeping peace, maintaining appearances, or ensuring that others remain comfortable. But when you choose to be brave, you reclaim the right to speak. You notice that expressing your truth doesn't harm others. Instead, it often invites honesty and respect in return. You start to articulate what you need without fear, to set boundaries without guilt, and to ask for help without shame. Each act, no matter how small, reinforces the understanding that your worth is inherent and not contingent upon constant resilience or sacrifice. And yet, courage requires patience with yourself. Some days you will falter, some days the old patterns of hiding, performing, and silencing yourself will resurface. You will feel the pull to retreat, to hide behind the armor you've grown so accustomed to, and that is okay. Courage is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about returning again and again to the choice to show up honestly. Every time you do, you strengthen your capacity for authenticity and connection. Every time you allow yourself to be seen, you remind yourself in the world that you are human and that being human is enough. The transformation is gradual but undeniable. You start to notice that the fear of vulnerability diminishes, not because it disappears, but because you have practiced stepping into it despite the fear. You recognize that courage and fear are not opposites, they coexist. The measure of bravery is how you act in the presence of fear, how you choose connection over isolation, honesty over pretense, presence over performance. Slowly, the heavy burden of constant vigilance begins to lift. You begin to understand that allowing yourself to be seen does not diminish your strength. It enhances it, giving it depth, resilience, and authenticity. And then comes the profound, quiet truth. The moment you embrace vulnerability fully, you realize that courage is not a one-time act. It is a continuous practice. It is a daily commitment to show up for yourself in a world that often rewards invisibility, to speak your truth in spaces where silence is expected, and to let your heart lead even when it trembles. Courage is the bridge between the life you have lived behind armor and the life you are capable of living fully. It is the choice to be known, to feel deeply, and to engage with the world as a whole, unmasked human being. You begin to notice subtle changes in your relationships and your own self-perception. Interactions feel less transactional, more intimate. Moments of joy are more vibrant because you are fully present. Moments of sorrow are more bearable because you no longer carry them alone. You begin to trust that even if others do not always respond as you hope, your choice to be courageous and authentic is not wasted. The act of showing up fully, of being vulnerable, becomes its own reward. It is the seed from which self-respect, connection, and genuine resilience grow. And in those quiet moments, when you allow yourself to simply be seen without pretense or performance, you feel a liberation unlike any other. You begin to understand that courage is not about being fearless. It is about feeling fear and moving forward anyway. It is about dismantling the armor that once protected you and realizing that the world is not as dangerous as you imagined. That letting yourself be seen is not a weakness, but a profound strength that reconnects you to yourself, to others, and to life itself. The takeaway is clear. Every day, find one small way to step into your courage. Share one truth, express one fear, reveal one part of yourself you have kept hidden. Observe what happens. Notice the relief, the connection, the lightness. Practice this consistently. Each act, no matter how small, builds a foundation of authentic courage that strengthens your inner life and transforms the way you show up in the world. You will realize in time that the strongest thing you can do is not to carry it all alone, but to allow yourself to be seen fully and unapologetically. Change doesn't arrive in a moment of clarity or a dramatic epiphany. It sneaks in quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the way you begin to respond differently to the same situations that once drained you. It comes in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the subtle shift from surviving to living intentionally. After learning to let yourself be vulnerable and courageous, you begin to realize that life has offered you a kind of invitation, the opportunity to reshape the way you move through the world, the way you relate to others, and most importantly, the way you relate to yourself. For years, you may have defined yourself by endurance. You thought strength meant never stopping, never complaining, never allowing yourself to feel weakness. You believed that life demanded constant sacrifice, that your value was measured by how much you could carry for others, and for a long time it worked. You were seen as dependable, resilient, necessary, but the cost was high. The parts of yourself that longed for rest, support, and recognition were neglected. The feelings you tried to ignore piled up quietly, like an undercurrent you could sense but never named. And now, after stepping into vulnerability and courage, you begin to see clearly how unsustainable that way of living has been. Change begins with recognition. You notice the patterns that no longer serve you. You recognize that saying yes out of obligation, fear, or habit has left you exhausted. You recognize that suppressing your emotions to maintain appearances has cost you intimacy and connection. You recognize that holding yourself to impossible standards has created an inner critic that is relentless, unforgiving, and exhausting. And the awareness itself is powerful. For the first time in a long time, you allow yourself to see that life does not have to be dictated by fear or habit, that you have a choice, that you can redefine what strength, responsibility, and presence mean on your own terms. The first step toward meaningful change often feels uncomfortable. You realize that change requires action, and action demands courage. You may hesitate, wondering if you are ready, questioning whether you deserve it, doubting your ability to sustain it. You may wrestle with guilt for prioritizing yourself, even in small ways. But change is not about grand gestures. It is about small, deliberate acts that align your outer life with your inner truth. It might begin with the simple decision to rest when your body demands it, to decline a request that drains you, or to voice a need you have previously kept silent. These seemingly minor choices ripple outward, reshaping the patterns of your life over time. Change is also about letting go. You begin to see that some of the habits, relationships, and expectations you've clung to are not serving your growth. They may have been necessary at one point, but now they weigh you down. It can feel terrifying to release them because they are familiar, because they offer the illusion of stability, because you fear the unknown. And yet, holding on comes at a cost greater than letting go. The freedom you gain from releasing what no longer serves you allows space for what you truly need: connection, authenticity, rest, and alignment. You begin to understand that saying no to some things is not selfish. It is an act of survival, clarity, and integrity. There is also the inner dialogue that accompanies change. You notice the voices of doubt and fear, the ones that whisper, "You are not ready, you'll fail. You'll lose what you've built." You learn to respond to them with curiosity rather than judgment. You explore the origins of these fears, observing that they are echoes of past experiences, old beliefs, and societal pressures. You begin to see that fear does not have to dictate your choices. You begin to understand that courage is not a single act, but a series of decisions made over and over in alignment with your values and your truth. Change requires this repetition, this intentionality, this willingness to act despite fear. Practical transformation begins with boundaries. You start to notice where your energy has been drained and where your attention has been hijacked by obligations that were never yours to carry. You start to define what is yours and what is not. You start to communicate these boundaries clearly, firmly, and compassionately without apology. And as you do, you notice a shift. The relationships and responsibilities that remain are those that honor your presence and respect your limits. The ones that resist change reveal their own limitations, their own inability to respect you, and this clarity, though sometimes painful, is liberating. Change also involves cultivating new habits that support your well-being and growth. You might start a practice of reflection, journaling, or meditation. You might prioritize rest, movement, or nourishment that renews your energy. You might choose conversations and connections that feel safe, supportive, and authentic. These small, deliberate actions accumulate, forming a life that aligns with who you are, not just who others expect you to be. Over time, they create a rhythm that feels sustainable, fulfilling, and deeply human. And yet, transformation is never without tension. Old patterns will attempt to reclaim their hold. The fear of judgment, the temptation to overextend, the pull of perfectionism all these may resurface, testing your commitment to change. But now you meet these moments with awareness. You pause, you notice, you choose differently. Each time you do, you reinforce a new narrative, one where your strength is integrated with self-care, where your courage is balanced with rest, where your humanity is honored alongside your responsibilities. There is a profound emotional shift that occurs when change is embraced in this way. You start to feel a sense of liberation, a lightness, a spaciousness in your mind and heart that you have not experienced before. You recognize that life is not meant to be endured alone, that strength is not measured by unyielding endurance, and that living fully requires both courage and compassion for yourself. You begin to experience the satisfaction of alignment, the peace of integrity, and the quiet joy of living in a way that honors both your needs and the needs of those around you. Perhaps the most subtle but powerful aspect of change is the transformation in how you see yourself. You begin to internalize the truth that your worth is not dependent on how much you carry, how strong you appear, or how indispensable you are. You learn to value your voice, your feelings, and your presence simply because they exist. You start to understand that true strength includes softness, that resilience includes rest, and that courage includes the willingness to be human in a world that often demands perfection. As you continue along this path, you discover that change is not a destination. It is a practice, a way of moving through life with intention, awareness, and honesty. You learn to meet each day with a willingness to observe, reflect, and act in alignment with your inner truth. You notice when you drift back into old patterns and you gently guide yourself back toward practices that nurture growth. You find that each small decision to honor your needs, to speak your truth, and to set boundaries strengthens your capacity to live fully and courageously. And in the midst of this process, you experience something extraordinary. You begin to feel free from the weight of expectation, free from the tyranny of perfection, free from the silent burden of carrying it all alone. You start to move through the world not as someone who simply survives, but as someone who is alive, present, and engaged. You discover that change is not about abandoning who you have been. It is about integrating all parts of yourself, including the strength, the vulnerability, the courage, and the humanity that make you whole. The takeaway is simple, though profound change begins when you allow yourself to act intentionally, to honor your truth, and to make choices that reflect your values rather than fear or habit. Begin with one small action. Set a boundary, speak an honest truth, prioritize rest or self-care. Notice the effect it has both inside you and in your world. Repeat this daily, knowing that transformation is a journey, not an event. Each deliberate choice chips away at old patterns and builds a foundation for a life that is aligned, authentic, and sustainable. You are capable of this. You are worthy of this. And the change you cultivate will ripple far beyond yourself, touching the people and the world around you in ways that are profound, subtle, and enduring. Growth is not a sudden revelation. It is the quiet, patient unfolding of a self that has chosen to move through fear, vulnerability, and change with intention. After months, perhaps years of carrying burdens alone, of hiding behind strength, of practicing courage, and of reshaping life with conscious choices, you start to notice something different inside yourself. The old restlessness, the constant tension, the nagging sense of incompleteness, these begin to soften. You feel more grounded, more present, more aligned with who you truly are. Growth is not about perfection or a dramatic transformation. It is about learning to exist fully in every messy, beautiful, challenging, and tender part of life. One of the first things you notice about growth is a deepening sense of self-awareness. You know yourself more intimately, not just the version that is strong and capable, but the version that is scared, tired, joyful, and longing. You recognize your patterns, your triggers, and your needs. You observe the ways in which you've been conditioned to hide or to overperform, and you begin to gently undo those habits. With awareness comes choice, and with choice comes power. The power to show up as yourself fully, without apology or pretense. This awareness is not always comfortable because it forces you to confront truths you may have avoided. But it is necessary for growth because growth requires honesty with yourself. Another aspect of growth is the integration of strength and vulnerability. You have learned that strength without softness is isolating, and vulnerability without courage can be terrifying. Growth is the delicate dance between these two seemingly opposite qualities. It is learning to carry responsibility without losing yourself, to care deeply without losing your boundaries, to love openly without sacrificing your dignity. You begin to see that life is not about choosing between being strong or being soft, but about learning how to weave both together so that each enhances the other. This integration brings a sense of wholeness that you may have never experienced before, a feeling that you are enough exactly as you are, with all your complexities and contradictions. Growth also brings a shift in perspective. You begin to see challenges not as threats, but as opportunities for learning and expansion. Where you once might have reacted with fear or defensiveness, you now pause, observe, and choose a response that aligns with your values and your truth. You recognize that discomfort is a necessary companion on the path to growth, not an enemy to be avoided. Pain, mistakes, and failures become teachers rather than punishers. You start to understand that life is not about avoiding difficulty, but about moving through it with awareness, courage, and compassion for yourself. A crucial element of growth is the cultivation of connection. You realize that the life you've been building in isolation behind armor is not fully satisfying. True growth comes from engagement with others, people who see you, support you, and challenge you in ways that help you expand. You begin to form relationships that are rooted in authenticity, where conversation is honest, emotion is shared, and support is reciprocal. You also learn to release relationships that are toxic, draining, or one-sided, recognizing that growth requires not just inclusion, but discernment. You find that by choosing connection wisely, you are no longer alone, even when you are standing strong. Growth is also reflected in your relationship with yourself. You start to notice a gentleness in the way you speak to yourself, a shift from criticism to curiosity, from judgment to compassion. You forgive yourself for past mistakes, for the times you overextended, for the moments you failed to be seen or understood. You realize that self-compassion is not indulgence. It is the foundation for sustainable strength and authentic living. You begin to celebrate your progress, no matter how small, and to honor the courage it took to arrive at this place of reflection and possibility. Along with self-compassion comes resilience. Growth is not about avoiding setbacks or failures. It is about developing the capacity to recover, adapt, and continue moving forward. You notice that you handle challenges with greater clarity, patience, and grace. You are less reactive, more grounded, and more able to choose your response rather than being swept away by old fears or patterns. This resilience is quiet but powerful. It is the internal proof that you are not defined by what has happened to you, but by how you choose to engage with your life in the present. Another hallmark of growth is purpose. As you integrate your experiences, your strength, and your vulnerability, you begin to understand what matters most to you. You clarify your values, your priorities, and the type of life you want to lead. You notice that you are no longer driven solely by external expectations or the need to perform. Instead, your choices are guided by a sense of meaning, alignment, and personal truth. You begin to invest in people, projects, and practices that nurture this sense of purpose, and you release what no longer serves it. Growth becomes the conscious curation of your life in accordance with what is deeply important to you. Growth also reveals itself in your ability to face uncertainty with calm and curiosity. Where once you may have feared the unknown, you now approach it with a sense of possibility. You recognize that not everything is within your control, and that surrendering to uncertainty is not weakness, but an act of wisdom. You learn to trust yourself, to trust the process, and to trust that even if outcomes are uncertain, your capacity to navigate life is expanding. You begin to see each moment as an opportunity to practice courage, connection, and self-awareness. Ultimately, growth is the integration of all the lessons you have learned along the way. The strength you once used to survive becomes a tool to thrive. The vulnerability you once feared becomes a source of intimacy and authenticity. The courage you once hesitated to claim becomes a way of life. The change you implemented becomes the foundation for continued evolution. And through it all, you discover a profound truth, that you are whole, capable, and worthy, not because of what you accomplish or how strong you appear, but because of your willingness to be real, to feel deeply, and to engage fully with life. The final realization is both simple and profound. Growth is not a destination or a final achievement. It is the ongoing practice of being human in all its complexity. It is showing up every day with awareness, honesty, courage, and compassion. It is learning from the past without being trapped by it, acting in the present with intention, and moving toward the future with hope and resilience. Growth is the choice to live fully, to love fully, and to honor yourself fully, even when life is imperfect and unpredictable. The takeaway is clear. Embrace your journey of growth by practicing awareness, courage, and compassion consistently. Celebrate your small victories, honor your setbacks, and allow yourself to evolve without judgment. Seek connection and release what no longer serves you. Remember that strength and vulnerability are not opposites, but complementary aspects of a whole life. Every choice you make to show up authentically, to speak your truth, and to honor yourself builds a foundation for lasting growth. In this way, you cultivate a life that is not only sustainable and resilient, but also rich, meaningful, and deeply human. And in the quiet moments when you pause and reflect on how far you have come, you realize that growth is the ultimate form of courage. It is the willingness to face yourself fully, to honor your humanity, and to live in alignment with your values. It is the understanding that you were never meant to carry life alone, that you were never meant to be perfect, and that your true strength lies in your willingness to be fully, beautifully, unapologetically you.